The movie kicks off with this girl named Ellen, right? She's just sobbing, bawling her eyes out and trying to call out to any spooky entity she can. She feels so dang lonely and is using her psychic powers to find some comfort. A few seconds later, this freaky voice answers her, saying she woke him up from a super long, dark nap. Ellen zones out, like she's in a trance. The entity tells her she's a misfit in this world and promises to come back for her. At first, she feels this insane pleasure, but then she starts screaming bloody murder when a scary-looking dude shows up and grabs her by the neck. Cut to years later, and Ellen bolts upright in bed, jolted from a nightmare. Her husband Thomas says good morning, and you can tell they're totally in love. Ellen says their honeymoon went by way too fast and tries to get frisky, but Thomas reminds her he has some big business stuff to handle. After he leaves, she mumbles to herself that he already landed the job and will be sent really far away. Next, we see Thomas walking through the busy streets of Wisborg, Germany, back in 1838. He gets to his office, and it turns out he's a real estate agent. His boss, Knock, congratulates him on getting hitched and says his wife is a real looker. Knock then tells Thomas about this foreign count, Orlok, who's super interested in buying a house in town. The catch is, Thomas has to go all the way to Orlok's castle in the middle of nowhere in Transylvania to seal the deal. Thomas is a little freaked out about traveling so far, but Knock tells him Orlok will pay a ton of money. He adds that if Thomas pulls it off, he'll get a permanent spot at the company. This gets Thomas thinking about his family's future, so he reluctantly agrees. When he gets home, he breaks the news to Ellen. He'll be gone for 6 weeks. As you'd expect, she's not happy and begs him not to go. But Thomas insists that when he comes back, they'll have enough cash to buy a house and he'll give her everything she's ever wanted. That night, Ellen snips off a piece of her hair and puts it in a locket. Meanwhile, in a totally bizarre scene, we see Knock doing this weird naked ritual, promising his lord that everything's been handled. The next morning, Thomas leaves Ellen in the care of his rich friend Friedrich and his wife Anna. They've got 2 daughters and Anna's pregnant again. Ellen looks so worried and begs Thomas to come back safe. She gives him the locket with her hair in it, and he rides off on his horse. In the next scene, Thomas shows up at a tiny village in Transylvania. The gypsies there give him major stink eye and mock him. The innkeeper comes out, and he's completely stunned when Thomas says he's there to meet Count Orlok at his castle and is only staying 1 night. The innkeeper says they don't even talk about that castle and tells him to get lost. But when Thomas offers to pay double, the guy reluctantly lets him stay. The next morning, Thomas wakes up and the whole village is empty. Everyone's gone. Even his horse disappeared, so he has to keep going on foot. The poor guy walks all day, and later that night a carriage just appears out of thin air and stops in front of him. What's super weird is there's no driver, but Thomas gets in anyway. The carriage is obviously headed to Orlok's castle, and Thomas starts getting a really bad feeling. Soon enough, the carriage gets to the castle, and Thomas cautiously goes inside. Right away, he sees Orlok. The doors slam shut behind him, and this monstrous voice from Count Orlok scolds him for being late. Thomas says sorry and follows him into a big hall where a dinner table is set up. Orlok tells him to sit and suggests they sign the deal for the house. Thomas, who can't see Orlok's face clearly, suggests they do it in the morning, but the Count insists he do it now, no questions asked. Then, he pours a drink for Thomas with these long, scary hands, which totally freaks Thomas out. While eating, a nervous Thomas accidentally cuts his finger with a knife. So Orlok says he'll ease his pain and tells him to sit by the fire. But Thomas starts sweating and panicking as he notices something terrifying about Orlok, who is steadily coming closer to him. The next morning, Thomas wakes up on the floor, all confused. He walks through the empty halls, yelling for someone, but the place is a ghost town. That's when he sees bite marks on his chest, and he's completely horrified. The scene then flashes back to the night before, where we see Orlok signing a contract with Thomas. But he pulls out this weird deed written in an ancient language Thomas can't understand. Orlok even snatches the locket Ellen gave Thomas, and tells him how lucky he is to have found love. He then gives Thomas a bag of gold coins, and forces him to sign the deed. After all that, a terrified Thomas says he wants to go home, claiming he's sick. But the Count refuses, saying traveling when you're sick is a bad omen. He then takes off with the locket, leaving our hero even more confused. Back in the present, Thomas tries to find a way out of the castle, but all the doors are locked. However, he finds a dark hallway and walks down it, hoping to escape. Inside, he stumbles upon a coffin-like box covered in strange carvings. Thomas carefully opens it and is horrified to see the shriveled body of Count Orlok. He tries to stab him. But after Thomas runs away, Orlok grabs the locket and talks to Ellen. He creepily explains that her husband will be lost to her soon. In a crazy twist, it's revealed that the mysterious entity Ellen summoned years ago is this very same guy. It finally hits Thomas that Orlok is a vampire who fed on his blood the night before, just like he did to Ellen. Meanwhile, Friedrich is worried sick when he sees Ellen sleepwalking, so he immediately calls for a doctor named Sievers. The doctor talks about what could be causing the problem and advises Friedrich to tie her down if things get worse. Then, they hear Ellen moaning in her sleep, so Sievers gives her some meds to calm her down. Back at the castle, Thomas wakes up and finds himself being chased by some wild dogs. He manages to escape by climbing out a window and jumping into a river. The next day, Dr. Sievers gets a call that a crazy patient has been admitted to the hospital. He goes to see the guy, and it's none other than Knock. He's surrounded by dead animals and acting totally out of his mind. The man claims his master is coming soon and eats a dove right in front of Sievers. Sievers tries to figure out who he's talking about, but Knock suddenly lunges at him. That evening, Ellen starts having seizures again, shouting, "He is coming!" over and over. Dr. Sievers then discusses Knock's case with Friedrich, saying it's similar to Ellen's. He suggests they call a specialist, a former professor of his named Dr. Alban. In another scene, a nun finds Thomas passed out in the river and takes him to a church to treat his injuries. The nuns tell him that the devil has his soul and is leading him astray. They recommend he stay because the devil can't enter a house of God. But Thomas is worried about Ellen and refuses to stay. Meanwhile, Dr. Sievers and Friedrich finally go see Dr. Alban. The old man recognizes his former student and greets him with a big smile. He asks what's wrong, and as soon as he sees Friedrich, he correctly guesses that one of his young female guests has a strange condition. The two guys are baffled by how he knew so easily. Elsewhere, Thomas gets a horse and leaves the church to go back to his wife. At the same time, Orlok is also on his way to Wisborg, hidden in a coffin on a ship. The ship starts having all sorts of problems. The crew members start throwing up blood and dying one by one for no reason. The captain notices a bunch of rats and figures out there's a plague on board. In another scene, Albin gets to Friedrich's house and meets with Ellen. She tells him she's always been psychic and knows things before they happen. She also tells him about the time she was lonely and looking for company, which made an entity appear in front of her. Ever since then, she's been having nightmares that are getting darker and darker. Soon, Ellen falls into a deep trance, and Albin examines her. He pokes her with a big needle, but she doesn't even flinch. Suddenly, Ellen starts having seizures again and keeps saying, "He is coming." Albin asks who she's talking about, but she doesn't answer. When she finally calms down, Albin tells Sievers and Friedrich privately that the woman is cursed by a demon. The two are skeptical, saying it's probably just her imagination, but Albin is certain it's not. Elsewhere on the ship, the crew throws the dead bodies of their shipmates into the sea. One of the guys then goes to check inside the coffin, which is where the rats came from. And then all of a sudden, back at the hospital, Knock fakes being sick, and when a guard comes, Knock takes his chance and attacks him. He then runs into the streets, screaming that his master has arrived. At the same time, Ellen suddenly blurts out that he's here and runs out of the house. She gets to the door, where an exhausted Thomas collapses. Thomas then tells Ellen in a weak voice that Orlok has her locket. Moments later, they find out that a ship has crashed in the harbor, and a ton of rats have taken over the city. Meanwhile, Knock meets with Orlok and takes him to a ruined mansion. Knock finds out Thomas is still alive and offers to kill him if needed. But Orlok tells him to wait, saying the guy is still useful. Knock then offers to bring Ellen, but Orlok says she has to come to him on her own and they can't force her. The next night, while sleeping, Thomas has a nightmare and pushes his wife away. This makes Ellen go to Anna's place, and she spends the night there. Elsewhere, Friedrich, Sievers, and Albin get together to talk about their awful situation. The town is swarming with plague-carrying rats, and people are dying left and right. Friedrich refuses to believe it's a demon's doing, but Albin says some things can't be explained by science. He insists that if they want to stop the evil, they first have to accept that it exists. He then reveals that they are dealing with an undead plague spreader, the vampire known as Nosferatu. Later, around midnight, Ellen wakes up with a start. And then, a voice says he's come to get her. He also reveals that Thomas signed a document that bound her to Orlok in exchange for a sack of gold. When she hears this, Ellen is skeptical, but the vampire insists it's true, though she still has to accept the deal on her own free will. He begs her to remember what they once shared and tells her she has 3 days to make up her mind. Orlok warns her that if she doesn't agree, he'll make Thomas suffer and kill everyone around her. A few moments later, Ellen wakes up from the nightmare. To her horror, she sees her friend Anna on the floor, being attacked by several rats. The next morning, the hospital is packed with desperate people. Friedrich goes to see Anna, who feels weak and says the baby in her womb is draining her. She admits that she doesn't even recognize herself anymore. Afterward, Ellen tries to warn Friedrich about the evil around them, but he refuses to listen and angrily demands that she and Thomas leave his house for good. Ellen begs him to reconsider since her husband is still sick, but Friedrich won't budge. With no other choice, Ellen takes her sick husband and heads back to their place. Later that night, she finally comes clean to her husband and tells him how she summoned Orlok years ago. She admits she accidentally tied herself to him and he claimed her as his lover. Ellen describes how it was great at first, but then it turned into torture. Thomas is stunned to hear all this, but he still cares about his wife. Just then, Ellen suddenly starts having seizures and tells Thomas that he never satisfied her the way Orlok did. This hits Thomas's ego hard, so he aggressively starts making love to his wife. Afterward, he tells her how much he loves her and promises he'll never leave her. Meanwhile, Albin keeps looking for a way to get rid of the Nosferatu. He soon learns that the vampire can be destroyed if a beautiful woman declares her love for him and stays with him until the rooster crows for the first time. This sacrifice will free everyone from the vampire's curse and the plague he brought. This means Ellen is the only one who can put an end to this nightmare. Later, around midnight, Anna wakes up to hear her daughter screaming while Friedrich is sound asleep. Anna then goes to her daughter's room alone, where she is shocked to find them being attacked by Orlok. The vampire then slowly starts coming towards her. The scene then cuts to Anna and her children's funeral, where Friedrich is completely broken. After the funeral, the group gets together to figure out what to do about Orlok. Albin reveals that he found the vampire's resting spot, and they'll go there tonight. Their plan is to destroy his coffin, so he won't have a safe place to hide. Ellen wants to come, but Thomas refuses, not wanting to put her in danger. He vows to find the vampire and drive an iron stake through his heart. Afterward, Albin and Ellen talk privately, and they both know a simple iron stake won't work. Ellen understands that she has to sacrifice herself to destroy the vampire, and she's ready to do it. But since Thomas would never agree, Albin decides to keep him busy at night, allowing Ellen to do the real mission. That evening, Thomas goes to find Friedrich, but he's not home. Elsewhere, we see Friedrich at the graveyard where his whole family is buried. The heartbroken man takes Anna's body out of the grave and starts kissing her. A little while later, Thomas, Sievers, and Albin get to the graveyard and are shocked to find Friedrich dead next to his wife's body. This devastates Thomas, and the group burns both bodies before heading to Orlok's mansion. In the next scene, Orlok announces that it's the third night, and Ellen opens her bedroom window, calling to him. Meanwhile, the trio arrives at Orlok's mansion and makes their way through a room full of rats to find the coffin. They take off the lid, and Thomas immediately drives an iron stake through the guy inside. But to their shock, it's Nock, not Count Orlok, who is killed. Albin then says they have to destroy Orlok's home so he has nowhere to go. Thomas tries to leave to save his wife, but Albin blurts out that the vampire can't be destroyed without Ellen's blood. It finally clicks for Thomas that Albin knew everything and purposely brought him here. The old man insists it was necessary and starts setting the place on fire while Sievers and Thomas run outside. On the other hand, Ellen puts on a wedding dress and waits for the vampire. Orlok soon arrives and asks if she agrees to be with him of her own free will. Ellen says yes, which binds her to the vampire. The two then jump into bed and start making out passionately, and he drinks blood from her chest. Orlok is so into feeding on Ellen that he doesn't even notice the first rays of the sun coming through the window. And since vampires are toast in sunlight, blood starts pouring from his mouth and eyes. His body quickly turns into a gross, shriveled-up corpse. Just then, Thomas rushes into the room and finds Orlok lying motionless on top of Ellen. He tearfully holds his wife's hand, and she looks at him before finally bleeding to death. Seconds later, Albin arrives and asks for forgiveness. He also confirms that her sacrifice has finally freed the city from the Nosferatu plague.